Right. Welcome back to the open session of the Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District Board of Trustees meeting for the 14th of May 2020. We have come back in from closed session, and I will find myself here. We will reconvene the regular meeting at 7:42. I'm going to read the civility statement now for those of you that are out there wishing to speak, and for anyone participating in this meeting, would you please pay attention to the following. We're going to communicate clearly and concisely with respect for the time of others. We will listen objectively and carefully consider the opinions of others. We will understand the counterproductive effects of disruptive, demeaning, and intimidating behaviors. We will understand and respect district policies and procedures. And most importantly, we will maintain a respect for the rich history of the district and the efforts of others who have served in the past. Again, the suggestion is that item 10 and its sub-items, the superintendent is suggesting they be pulled from the agenda for more preparation on the items. I don't know that we need to poll anyone other than to take an action to say to amend the agenda as proposed. I'm a firm believer that if there's something that staff needs to do to present a complete report, that we would do that. The agenda is being modified. First, there's a personnel action item that will be discussed when we get to that. That was modified at the beginning of the meeting prior to closed session, and now there's a suggestion that we pull. Do I have a motion that we support the superintendent's recommendation to pull item 10 and its sub-items? This is Ken Pfalzgraf here. I'll be making my comments now. I'm going to briefly cover a couple of things that will be discussed this evening. I'm going to give you kind of a general overview and dive into the empty pool like I usually do and address a couple of the elephants in the room, but then when it comes time to the staff recommendations and stuff, I'll limit my comments and be happy to hear what my colleagues have to say. The first thing I want to talk about is probably the biggest elephant in the room, and that is the district grading policy as it relates to COVID. Everybody understands COVID, right? And you all probably know someone who's been affected by it. And the first thing I want to remind everyone is, as of this very moment, there is no district policy on grading. That will not happen until the board votes on it tonight. The grading policy change for COVID does require board approval. Until that vote is finalized, what you're hearing on the street is pure speculation. I would certainly hope that there are not people in the organization who have taken it upon themselves to take up and support one methodology or another prior to having the fair, firm, and consistent foundation the board-approved policy will provide. So to be very clear, the earliest opportunity staff would have to have a direction on the grading policy in this district will happen tomorrow morning at the open of business. Now, when it comes to different opinions on the grading policy, as a parent, I can certainly understand the motivation to make sure that our own children have all the success and breaks they can get to succeed in the world out there, but I am not an advocate of one child succeeding at the expense of another. It's kind of funny in my personal life. I leave Acton every morning, I drive to Beverly Hills, and then I return to Acton each night. This experience gives me a very unique look at what affluence, influence, and effluence are. I would suggest you hit the thesaurus, especially for that last one there. I kind of look at this and see it as it's a good exercise in people sorting. I grew up in a little town of 5,000 people. The state penitentiary was there. And so literally half the population of the town was in prison. I was not in prison, just to clarify that. But my little brother, born when I was 13, he was quite enamored with himself when he became the football quarterback and homecoming king. Oops. Sorry, Joe. unfortunately, when he left the school in the safe boundaries of our little town and got out there in the real world, he was not the big man on campus anymore, and it was quite a shock to him. His bigger brother, who was far less educated, seemed to do a little bit better. There, I got that shot in on him. But part of our job as parents, and to some extent educators, is to prepare our kids for the reality of the real world and how to effectively compete in it on a fair level. So back to our situation, there was already great disparity in resources across any community prior to COVID. I want to tell you that if you don't know some, we could be one of them tomorrow. There are families who were fairly stable in the past and who are now in food lines. We should always remember that. We should also remember that there are people at home unemployed, unable to go to work. Their lives have been turned upside down, and there are family situations where just putting food on the table and figuring out how to keep the power on is the worry, and we should not be compounding the worries of those families by polluting the situation with theories about how we grade one student or another. We want to remember that the students have had no control over what happened here. I want to tell you that I personally know what a D- looks like in a couple of classes when I'm supposed to graduate next week. But that was my fault. That was my behavior. That was my lack of effort. There are kids that could be in that same situation today due to no fault of their own, a lack of resources, a lack of understanding, a lack of support, and I do not want those students punished. Be certain about this. Our high school seniors are going into the worst, most competitive job market I have seen in my lifetime. When we talk about recessions that we've been through in the 70s and that type of thing, there is nothing like what our seniors are going out into. So I think the minimum we owe these kids is a diploma, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but we need a grading policy to get the diplomas out, and that grading policy will be voted on tonight, and that is when diplomas will become my sole focus in life for the next 13 days. I have a very simple outlook on this because I was born into a family that wasn't that smart. We didn't have a lot of money or a big house or fancy cars, and that kind of shows with me, right? But my vote tonight on the grading policy will reflect what is best for the majority of the kids in this district who are going to go out into the world as seniors from this town and try to make it. And so that will be my focus on the grading policy. Next, I want to talk a little bit about graduation. I just told you, as the board president, my sole focus is to get diplomas in the hands of our seniors. When they started school this year, we had a contract with them per se. The contract was, you have attended school for 12 or 13 years, you have done the work, and at the end of the year, if you have the proper grade, we are going to give you a diploma on May 27th. I don't want to renege on that deal because we can't have a party or everybody can't dress up. I get social distancing. Those parameters are outside of our control. We're not going to violate county and state law and do something ignorant, but putting a diploma in the hand of a senior like we said we would do at the beginning of the year is going to become my focus in life for the next 13 days. I will be unbearable. Okay? And again, this district has waited and waited and waited for the people above us to give us direction to what a grading policy must look like. You're going to see differences in the grading policy as it varies from district to district. That is what local control is about. So, again, I'm not a proponent of violating health codes, and I'm certainly not a proponent of exposing our employees who are working here now to the hazards that might become with a mass intake of 80 sets of books and Chromebooks and the like that cannot be taken in, that cannot be sterilized, and cannot be stored in the appropriate way. But I am not going to relax my effort to hand someone a diploma. I don't think that the kids in this town are going to make $1 million selling the science book that half of them didn't want to read halfway through the year. So I'm a firm believer that things will come back to us, and maybe I'm goofy, but at the end of the day, I do not want to break my promise to the class of 2020. Also, I do not want to hear that somebody's diploma got held up over a 29-cent overdue library book. I think Larry already stomped over that joke of mine. Finally, I'll close out my comments with this. There was an item pulled off the agenda tonight. We need to understand that when we make business decisions, whether it's about solar energy or expenses, that the majority of the expenses in this district are for personnel costs. And when we decide that we want to put our kids in a physically, socially, and educationally safe environment, it costs money to staff that environment. And I have no problem with doing that. But when it comes time to realizing that we are so dependent on charter revenue, that is going to dry up. I've told everybody that a million times, whether it shows in the paper or not. That is a fact. Our survival in the long term depends on how we have been very stingy with our reserves. That's critical. So when it comes time to talk about putting in projects and doing projects, I am not a proponent of starting new projects, and I'm going to be looking for cost neutrality. I'm not going to be looking at whose car gets shaded or things like that. We do not have the luxury of, there's somebody out there looking to predate, that's not even a word, predate our reserves, and that is the future of this. I'm thinking that I'm very hopeful and maybe naive, but I think that we're going to come out of our little challenge here by showing everybody that this is a good place with good people, and we're going to come out of this stronger than we were. And so thank you for bearing with me. Again, I'll be fairly silent when it comes to the discussion of items. That concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you. So this is a notification that the submission has been made. There is no discussion this evening nor action. You will have a hearing on this with a subsequent vote. Thank you. For the personnel action report, this isn't something I want pulled, but just a comment. I would like exit interviews done, as always, please. Outside of the regional pay and benefits schedule differences from district to district, I'm wondering about the departures. I always do, and I think the gains that we have made in the SPED system are substantial, and the retention of competent staff in that area is very important to me as we look to maintain the progress and the gains we have made, especially in that area. There is a method to my madness. Now, had I just done what I should have done, I would be making any comment I wanted right now, and the rest of the board would have already spoken. And it takes me back to the old days where the board would go on for quite some time convincing each other who was right and wrong. So everyone had the information I was going to say before we had the other board members comment. So I have no further comment other than to say what you just heard out of the board that I'm pleased to serve with is you had the most senior member telling us his concerns about this, which are very valid, but not being placed on the record to be appearing somewhere down the road that he did not support the success of all students in the district, and that calls for a great deal of maturity. Mr. Jorgensen, you have dedicated your career to this district. Kelly, you are a career educator, and Mr. Roque, it wasn't too long ago you could have been in the same situation, so I'm pleased to serve with this board. Thank you for your tolerance, but I think that everybody puts their differences aside and does what's best for the kids, especially you, Mr. Fox. Thank you. Kim, this is Ken Pfalzgraf. What a perfect way to introduce yourself to the community other than a smile and however you're dressed. I think everyone's really clear now what your goals are, and I think there's a lot of people attending the meeting tonight that have been enlightened about what your goals are. I'm sure we didn't hire you for you to fail, but thank you for sharing this plan with us. I want to start off by talking about something Mr. Fox talked about. For the past couple of years, I've watched Mr. Fox, every time a charter came in here that was online, express a concern that sitting at a computer and not having access to a live person is concerning to him, and that some kids may not be reached that way. My law classes at night, I have been suddenly thrown into behind the computer, and there are Zoom things and stuff, but I certainly understand his point. That said, I think that some of these online programs aren't that motivating to students because they depend on algorithms that loop back and say because you missed step 9x-3 that you'll do 2 more pages of exercise, and then it turns into the worst rote memory exercise I've ever seen in my life. I recall that in early April, staff was rolling out the theoretics of how they were going to do this in site group meetings where parents could log on and see what was going on. And staff wasn't afraid to talk about, they were looking at different things. And back then I was making comments, we are not a virtual environment, we're a seat-based environment, and we're proud of that. But that said, in a short period of time, about a month, you have seen something come together that is individual in its approach. There's not just one, we didn't sign up for another curriculum program that we bought at the spur of the moment. We didn't have to do all these computerized assessments that set up these algorithms for each student. And I think the most important part for me is that our staff, I think Mr. Kubella, you've been here, what now, 3 hours? I'm glad that you're up to speed already. Thank you very much. Both the high school principal and the elementary principal, both of you have done a great deal to make sure that the social aspects of your sites and how people are made to feel comfortable. You've made great headway there, and now this is just an added bonus. What I'm really happy about this is we have to remember that our teachers that have been here for years and years, they've done really well to turn out students that are educated to do well out in the world and in the job market. And I'm glad to see that the individuality of those teachers has been retained through the system. I don't like to see cookie cutter, everyone doing the same thing, because I think that before this COVID thing broke out, I think the teachers had a pretty good grasp on the kids in their class and what they needed as individuals, and I see evidence here that is that has been maintained. I will say that I'm very impressed that everyone is willing to go on live online with anyone watching and start popping links and having them work and hit. And I very much appreciate the IT department and their ability to make this happen. I haven't seen a request for curriculum purchases and additional IT elements. So we've basically taken a team that's been forced to look at providing their skill set in a different way, come together in a short period of a month, put something live on the board that I'm very impressed with in the way that it retains individuality and lets teachers reach individual students. So great job, everyone.